Hi guys, yes, I'm in sleeveless. I couldn't find my other dyeing clothes. I may dye today or not, but I thought instead of trying to change my clothes in the middle of everything because Candace is coming, I would dress for the occasion, yes. We have Zola. She thinks I'm talking to her but not looking at her, so yeah, she's over here. Here, wait a minute. Let's see if we can have a pitiful Zola moment. Can you see Zola? See? Hi, sweetie. Yeah. Ignore the dust bunnies if you see any. Okay. That's the personal moments. I know that Betsy had asked me to sew for you guys online. The deal is this is a little different. I made it up to the edge. This isn't when I'm having to work things through in my head as I'm doing this. And this drum, sorry, I didn't even say it was a drum. This drum is not going to be quite as primitive as some of the other ones. So I'm adding a little bit to it, hopefully. Because I got to go to Joann's. I didn't open until 7. It was close till 7 last night. So I went in there. It was almost as bad. It was almost worse than Christmas when I was in there. People were snatching and grabbing, and I had to wait in line. And I'm trying to thread this. Good morning, Deb. Zola says hi back. She's over by the window. They're watching the people walk around. I guess everybody's trying to start their New Year's resolution of losing weight and not eating anymore. We have 1 more or 2 more days of we have to eat all this food or it's going bad. Okay, I think I've showed you guys this. It's hard to see, but this is a quilter's knot, and I like using these. I learned these a long time ago. Hi, Carol. And you put your needle up in the air, and then you take the long end of your tail of your thread, and you put it parallel to your needle. Hi, Betsy. Trying to do what you said, but some of it I had to do without you. And you wrap it around the needle if your fingers work in the morning. But I can't get it to do it. You wrap it around. If you're really good at doing this, which some of these quilters are, you don't have to clip your tail off. When you're quilting, you only do like 3 or 4, but I do a bunch because we're going to be using this for finishing. And yes, of course, it's going to like catch. The thread that I got is ended up being a sulky. Was it a sulky? No. Wait a minute. Let me see what it is. I could have warned you. Warned you about what? That I did. I put on there that I was doing this if you're saying it. Let's see. It's dual duty, all purpose. Wow. It must be Coats and Clark. Yeah, it is a Coats and Clark. It's a poly thread. I normally don't get poly, but I was really looking for a thread that would match this. I got one that was lighter, but this one isn't going to work. It was going to show. Plus, have you ever been in one of those stores or anywhere and someone wants to be where you are and they like sit there with their cart or they like push you over? This woman was like having this cow to get some threads. So I just grabbed what you didn't see my warning. I now have to text you. You're going to add to my dilemmas. I've got a few options. I'm probably not going to use them, but I'm going to go through my thought process so you guys will know what it's like. So you can sort of think this through too when you do your drum. So I did get it's going to have velvet pellets on it. I'm sorry. I'm going to move you guys over so you can't see, so I can see this, so I'm not putting it over. I did get this round, and I worked it out where the image is going to not get stuck in the seam. And then what I did is I basted it down, and I just grabbed the interfacing, which is really, really thick. And Betsy put some comments on the other video, which is a heavy weight interfacing or either craft weight. Sometimes it's called upholstery weight. If you get the upholstery or what they use on curtains, the glue is spaced a little sparsely. I guess that's so it can move a little bit. The heavyweight craft is really good because a lot of people used to use Skirtech and other things like that. The lightweight isn't going to do it. It's not going to stick. So using this heavyweight is to me, a good in between for not using a mat board or some other hard board on the top of your drum so you can use it, or not leaving any, or not putting anything at all. Because if you don't put anything at all, it tends to, when you start stuffing it, dome up some. And like, again, this one's not going to be as primitive, and I don't want it to do it. Plus, mine are models, and they go around, like lots of times I'll use 2-ply cotton mat board on my drum because I'm really not going to use my drum. It's a model. So I do things a little different just because it's got a different purpose and it travels around. And even when they're traveling and I package them, they still get squished and mushed and out of sorts. But anyway, I've put my knot, which you can't see. Oh, I'll show you on the inside. I told you that I just sort of freely measured. As you can see, there's not as much, because remember there was like over an inch on each side. I trimmed this much off the edge, and I did hand sew it. I did a back stitch, and because I was doing it on velvet, and I hope none of this leaks through. If it does, I can tack it on the outside if there's any places that didn't catch when I was sewing it. That's why I love velvet. I love using moire. Quilting fabric is great because you can find all of these wonderful patterns. But I find using quilting weight fabric on things like this, it's hard because if you pull on them when you're finishing, you can pull a hole in the fabric. You have to be very careful when you're using it. There's a lot of these, like when you're doing needlepoint or on board, there's some of these spray and other new glues out there now that I'm going to play with because that's what everyone's doing, but I'm still going to be old school as much as I can because I really do not want to glue my trim and stuff down. I like to sew mine down, try to use the least amount of glue. It's going to eventually break apart no matter what they're doing with it. I mean, they've only been working with this stuff for so long, so not that you're going to be able to totally take a ornament apart, but I just find glue not the best thing for this situation, and glue and I don't always mix. But I will show you what I did. Again, working on your thought process. I'll show you on the bottom. I tacked down the seam allowance. Oh, let me move you guys over so I can see if anyone's saying anything. I tacked down the seam allowance. Hi, Barbara. I tacked down the seam allowance on the bottom of the velvet, and I'll show you, I can go back over that, but what I'm going to do now is show you guys, I'm going to leave this tail, I'm going to tie this off in a minute, but this velvet, I'm going to take, I'll move you guys over. I have the knot in the tail. I'm going to bring this through from the back. I don't have to worry about how big the knot is or anything because this is not going to be like a small finish where I am finishing a needle book or anything and it's going to need to be flat because this is on the inside. So then I make the edges meet, and because it's velvet and this thread matches, I'm going to do what they call like a ladder stitch. So I went straight across. That's Rucker licking his paw, so we're having a cadence time going. And I pull, and then I'm going to whip over. It's sort of like whipping over, and I'm going to come back into the velvet. I'm intending to cover this over, so that's why I am whipping over. If I wasn't, there's another way you can do this, where once you come through your velvet, let me get the velvet straight. Rucker dear, I know they love listening to you, but stop please. Or like seeing you, not hearing you. Anyway, instead of whipping over, you can take your needle and catch some of the velvet and bring it up through here. So that'll make you come into the underside of the linen, if you can see, and pull it. And there's the tail from the other I've got to tie off. And you would just take another little stitch almost exactly where you came up, go up under and catch the velvet. I'm just going to, and another thing you could do instead of whipping all the way over is you can go over the velvet, go up under the linen, catch it, and you want to go as close to the edge as possible. Go back down, up in the screen, Elizabeth, and go to the bottom and come up on the velvet. Any of those, just play around. Take two pieces of fabric and sew them together and find what works for you and the way that you can hide your threads. Another thing you can use when you can't find it, when you've got like two fabrics that don't really match. Betsy's having problems with her internet. We're so sorry. Tell those cows to get going. Hi, Barbara. Getting ready to go back to school. Waved at you. Yay. I'm glad your daughters got to come see you. That was a great picture of them. I hope you guys had a great Christmas. Hi, Timothy. I'm hoping I have a wonderful New Year too. I'm not sure what I'm going to do. I think the kids are working. Issa went home Sunday. I tried to get her to stay since she didn't get to come when she was supposed to, but she said she had to put her, what is it called? Nightstand together. She got a new nightstand in bed and it didn't come with pulls. So she's going to drill holes in there and put the pulls in. And she wanted a few minutes to decompress before she went back to work. So I'm here trying to figure out what I'm doing. I might go to a movie. I don't know if anybody's watching that's a homie that wants to do a movie on New Year's Eve, but I don't know if many of you remember Barbara, oh my God, how did her name leave my head? Barbara Wade. Oh my gosh, getting old. Anyway, Barbara Wade and I, and sometimes her daughter, would... Sorry, you lost me? Oh, okay. Anyway, they would always go to the movie theater on New Year's Eve, and sometimes we would pick an earlier movie that had a timing where we would sort of hang around and slip and sit somewhere else. So sometimes we would do a 2-for-1 illegally, but that was a fun thing we used to do. And the kids and I started doing that, but they're not going to be around to do it. So I'll have to figure out what I'm going to do. I don't think I want to stay home, and I'm not going to drive around and pick up people knowing that they have a life and I don't. Plus, I don't really want to be on the road. I don't really want to be on the road when all these people are driving around. But anyway, this is what you do. And as you can see, you just go back, and I was trying to make these tutorials where they were just the tutorials and not my personal life. But anyway, we're going, hi Donna, we're working on a drum. We're putting the top on, but I'm just stitching back and forth, and there's no way that you guys are going to sit here and watch me stitch this whole thing on. That's why I got it on. So we could start that and see how once, move these over. Once you start doing this, it really, if it fits in nicely, you can do it fairly quickly, especially if you don't have to worry about the thread showing, and that's where it matches, and I know I'm going to cover it up somehow. So we're going back and forth doing that. And then this is also like any other thing you're doing with hand sewing. You get around to where you're over halfway around, and if it starts looking like one side's going to sag over the other, you can start adjusting it. But at halfway, you can see if it's going to work or not. Trust me, I've done it all. You get halfway there and you start trying to pull one side back to the other, and you see it's really bunching up, and you're like, okay, I'm going to have to take this apart and do, either redo the top or make another base, or either re-sew the seam on the base. And like I told you, I did an outline stitch where the top is looped and the back looks like straight stitches. And then when I turned it over, I saw a couple places that didn't go all the way through because this velvet's pretty thick. This is not clothing upholstery. It's a clothing velvet. It is dyeable velvet, and it's also almost in the range of upholstery weight. It's not quite. The nap is smaller and not as fluffy as clothing, but it's hard to find clothing, and it's actually velveteen. It is cotton. It's a nice, I get it from a group that they specialize in dyeing. So anyway, I also am not going to trim the inside seam. I'm playing with how deep I want this to be, so you can see there's a demarcation where I had only done a 1/2 inch because that's what I did at the top. And I started looking at this going, well, one thing, it's like really wide and I don't want it quite as tall. So I redid the seam on this. Let me move you guys back so I can see who's watching and say hi to you guys. So and with velvet, as you can see, I've just finger pressed this and it's holding it down. That's why I love it too. But another thing, I don't know if I've ever talked to you about this, is I'm not sure why, but when Nancy from Atlanta Needlepoint had me starting to take over the finishing, and I think it was Norvell used to be her finisher, and I took some classes from her, and I'd always been stitching. Her thing was, and I read it and had other teachers tell me, you always stitch counterclockwise, especially when you're doing round, but when you're putting things together. Not sure why, but it works. And if it's something that you get into a habit of doing, you do it. But you can do the other way. But I'm going to stitch this one till around to about right here, where the middle is, where the bees antenna are, and then check and see to make sure if it's still fitting and everything's going to work out right. The other thing I did, because there is a seam here, and I am working, this one's different because everyone had asked to do one that has stitching on the top. I took the middle, which this one I'm lucky because this image motif is the middle, and I loosely lined it. I mean, I didn't like go to an anal moment, but I did the seam of the drum to hit the middle of this motif. So it's like the bottom of this piece. So what I'm thinking, I decided I would go around, and I couldn't find, I don't want to make cording, and I'm not sure that just doing the cross stitches like some people do on their drum, just do the herringbone stitch on the edge, was really going to do this. Because again, this is not a primitive piece. It's in between. I found this wonderful bead stuff. I've used it before, and I am thinking that the edge of this is going to have this beading, and I'm just going to whip stitch it on once I've got the top on there. And I bought this lovely thread to use, or either I'm going to use some cotton thread and just run it through a waxer just to strengthen it, or if I have some other red. But this has got a little shine to it. It's another Coats & Clark. I was looking at Sulky, and then I think I tried to buy one of the Sulkies, but it didn't have the little bottom thing on it, and the guy at the register totally freaked out, and no one knew quite what to do, and I was like, I think I can live without this. I'll just improvise. And then, since this doesn't have a pattern on it, because some people do stitch a top and they do pattern fabric, or either stitch a pattern, and this is sort of big, I was like, that's just going to look like one big, huge Romina La Festa. Lovely linen. But, I just dropped what I was going to do, so you have to wait a minute. Blank space. I normally wouldn't do this, but I found this interesting stuff. And I think it's just sort of cool and be different for me. And it's got flowers on it. So we have a bee, and we have flowers, and we have bling, which we're trying to make this not quite as primitive. And it's got wire on the ribbon. I found this in their section. I also found some other things I liked, but they were all where you had to have them cut, and they had a line of people waiting to have things cut, and I was like, not doing that either. But I'm thinking that this is going to look nice around here, and it's going to add some dimension and some character to the body of the drum. But I'll have to see once it's all stuffed and I decide what I'm going to do, but I really think this is coming on here. And so I'm going to show you really quick how yes, you saw my space again. My trees will come down soon. I'm trying to figure out when. I usually leave them up until the 5th of January, but I'm scared if I leave them up much later and don't start taking some of them down, they're going to stay up way too long. One year I left them up almost till February, and then when I was living at home with my parents, we would put trees up, but we'd always go to West Virginia to my grandparents' house for Christmas. And one year we had a small tree. We didn't put a big one up because we were in that mode of kids aren't helping mom, mom's busy, dad works shift work, and we were getting the charm of Christmas was starting to elude us. So she kept asking us to take our tree down, and we wouldn't. So it was in our dining room. So she just closed off the doors and left it. And that's when we always did real trees. And it was April. I'm surprised our house didn't burn down because the tree was so dry. It was not even. It was so dry the needles barely fell off of it. So, and we had to do the walk of shame of putting our tree out. So that was when, well, we lived in a small town too, but that's when you put almost anything out and the trash people would take it away. So yes, in about April, they took our Christmas tree away. So that was rather interesting. And again, the more I think about it, the more I think, wow, our house didn't burn down. But I'm going to show you really quick. I'm going to move you guys so I can't see you. But just pretend that I've just finger pressed this over. We have a knot in our thread, and we're going to skim and catch some of this interfacing. And you have your finger underneath here. I've pricked myself before, but I'm getting better about that. And this is also thicker fabric. And I'm just going to baste. And basting doesn't have to look really nice. You don't want to make it too sloppy, but I'm just catching the interfacing and going up through the velvet and pulling it. And that's what you do. And as you can see, like there's a couple points on this circle. When I'm putting it together, I will be pushing that up under when I sew the two pieces together. But you fold the fabric over and you try to work out the least amount of points as possible. And then you just go all the way around this and end it. And it's all basted down. And I did the same thing on the top piece. It's a little harder with the linen. You have to make sure you don't go through and have the thread show through. The other thing that you can do, since this is not going to have a lot of pressure on it, you can do what they call heirloom. Instead of going around it and knotting it, ending heirloom stitching, you just go over the same spot over and over several times, and then you clip it, and it's supposed to stay in place. And they use this when they do French seam stitching and things like that. You don't want a knot or you're ending something on the top. But the bottom is ready, and the bottom doesn't have a design on it, so we don't have to really worry about lining the bottom up to the back seam. But I'm going to start at the back seam just because I started the top there, so that will just keep me in line and I know where I am. It's just, hi Romina, getting ready for New Year's. So what I'm going to do is bring the needle up and bring it up through the seam and right on the edge of the velvet, and the knot's on the inside right there. So I take my bottom and I'm going to go over, and I'm going to press that point in and go up through the velveteen, or velvet. I just say velvet just because. And then I'm going to come back over. I'm going to whip stitch this because the velvet will help hide the thread and it'll make it faster. But I just keep going back and forth, and you really take a tiny little stitch at the edge of the velveteen. And you want to do this so the velveteen starts going right even with the side of the drum. You don't want it sitting on top of it, and you don't want it sitting underneath. So that's why another reason after you get about halfway through or so, you're going to start checking to make sure it fits just inside of the drum, because you don't want it above it. It's just going to, it'll make it hard. Plus we're going to put that wonderful bling on there. I think the needles are catching the thread. So I normally don't put the bottom and the top or attach them, because I'm not going to sew them up, because if I sew them up without putting any stuffing in there, that would be disastrous. Well, it would just look like a blob. But anyway, you just keep doing that, and I'm going to do this just a little bit, and then I'm going to finish the bottom and fill it from the top. Finish the top and fill it in from the bottom, which is usually opposite of what I usually do. I'm still playing with if I'm going to show you what I do with that, because trust me, it's really messy. I have a huge box that I have both the lizard litter and the shavings inside of it. And that sounds good, Romina. Waving at Lisa. So I'm playing with how I will if I could set the camera where you can see it, and and even though I keep my lizard litter and the shavings in a box, I usually don't take them out of my studio. And right now my studio is still a mess because of I'm sorry, when I pause, I am either thinking or reading some messages that are popping up. I'll have to look at that in a minute, Romina. Wait a minute, she sent me a picture. I'm multitasking here. Anyway, I don't want you guys to see how horrible my studio is, and it's still a mess from the water damage, because we need to move all kinds of things in there. But ooh, I do like that. Oh, cool. Where do we get that linen? You have to let me know where we get it. Yeah, let me get with you after I finish this, but that linen will work perfectly. And I think that if we finish it, just talking about something else, because Romina and I are working on a piece that I told you about. We're going to try to release, and I guess I'll just throw it out there, Romina. We're going to do Seasons in a Jar, and we're going to try to make it look like a mason jar. And I'm playing with how the finishing of it is going to be. It'll be framed, but I'm thinking we might finish it up as looking like a mason jar. So we're working on this. So we'll start showing you guys. And again, that will be in Nashville. And then we'll decide how we're going to release it after that. But we're going to do at least the 4 seasons. So anyway, I am again going to I'm going to finish stitching this all up, and then I will show you guys. I may do a quick little video, like lay plastic everywhere, because like I said, I keep all my stuff in a box, but I still, even doing it in a box, that lizard litter, not livers, can escape, and it's really hard to get those crushed holes up, and you don't really want it in your space. So I'm going to figure out how to show you how to do that. And I also got, because you can just take a cup and pour the lizard litter inside of here once it's stitched up. And then you put the shavings inside of there. And then I found that if you get one of those little funnels and start pouring the lizard litter in there and you pack it down, that lizard litter starts going in between all the wood shavings, and that's what starts giving you a really hard filling. I know some people like to, I don't know if they spray the stuff before they put it in or they spray the outside of their piece. I just know that some people have talked about spraying the piece, and it helps the shells and the shavings to clump together and make a harder fill. I don't like doing that only because I don't want my stuff to run. So, but I know a lot of people fill their stuff outside because it is a messy thing. But that's the next thing we'll do. But I hope that you understand what I was showing you, and I'll show you again on just stitching back and forth. And again, like I said, I can do this a little less fastidious and not worry about the blind stitch as much, because this velvet is very forgiving and you can pull on it and it doesn't show. The other thing you can do if you really need to do a blind stitch and keep it is you can skim the edge of both pieces, like you would skim it here, come up, if my fingers work, and then come straight across and skim the top edge of the body of the drum. And you can stitch it together that way too. That's more if you've got thinner fabric or you don't need your piece to show that type of thing. But then again, I thought I told you, I said I would go through some thought processes that all of us are different on how we think things. Some people, believe it or not, start stitching on their fabric and do things without even making models or sketching it out and drawing and doing things later. I went to art school, so when I start making things, we always had to make a model. Like one of my classes, each year we had to take a construction class, and it was a commercial professor, and he would we had to redo existing items, and we had to do everything up to getting a copyright for it. And this was for people that may have wanted to go on to graphic arts. I was a fine art, which ended up being a graphic, and fine arts love their stuff and don't ever want to sell it but want to make money, so that doesn't really work. Graphic people I call them prostitutes. You just sell anything and I tell people I am a prostitute. I just sell anything for money. But we had to take existing items and try to remake them into something unique. And so we did a few things, like we had to redo a salt and pepper shaker and redo them in a way that no one else had done them. And then our class project was we had to build a chair that had not been built before, or like take the structure of the chair and do it, and we had to do it all the way up to making a pattern for it. And so we started with, you start with small things, like you draw it on paper, then you start making it in paper, then you start making it in different materials in small scale, and then you go to bigger, you start picking your materials for your bigger scale. So what I do when I start working with a design is, like, if I know I'm going to do a needle book or I'm going to do something like that, I start with some dimensions, and then I start playing with putting the design in my chart pattern maker computer stuff, because I don't like to do a lot of hand stuff, because drawing by hand is totally different by putting it on the computer and putting it in grids. It just sometimes doesn't always work well, but I start gridding it out, and then I print it out to size, and then see where I need to adjust it. And like if it's going to be a book, I'll put a spine on it, and I make sure I leave the room for it to fold and other things like that. So when I first started doing drums, I cut all the pieces out and taped them all together so I would understand the construction bit of the piece and adjusted it from that. And then I don't know if any of you guys have taken my box classes. I try to make my boxes not traditional. I have one that's got a peak on it. It's rectangular, but it's got a peak on it, and the flaps go. So I do all the construction of that and then make sure my design works on that and do it that way. Other people do it different, and then there's a lot of designers that don't even do their own finishing. They basically, I don't know how they work. I've only worked with one finisher. It was Judy Odell, and she gave us all of the sizes, and we just came up with the design, and then she did the finishing, which she told me, she's like, you being a finisher, you're going to get this and go, oh, yay, wonderful, somebody finished it for me. And then you're going to start looking at it going, well, I wouldn't have done that. Which I told her I wouldn't, but I did. Because each of us have our own way of doing things, and it's not a criticism of anyone. It's just like if you wear your clothing different. Some people wear belts, some people don't. But anyway, there are quite a few people that don't do their own finishing. Even if they teach it, they'll teach what was given to them by the finisher. So that's really two people working with it. I do all of it. So anyway, that's my little dialogue about that. I hope that I've helped you with understanding how to put a high bath, putting a stitched top on to a drum. And like I said, I don't try to read other people's instructions. I'll stitch some of their stuff sometimes and I'll read it. I just try not to let that pollute what I do. And I try to pick designers that I don't have to think, because that's how I started. That's how Edna Mendel got me into it, because I would buy stuff and go, oh, I don't like that, and change it all up. And by the time I finished, it didn't even look like what it was supposed to look like. And she's like, why don't you design your own stuff? So if I do personal stitching, I like for it to be something that I'm not really thinking about. Sometimes it's just changing the colors. I might add a little bit to it because I don't like the negative space they've left or something like that. I'm always bratty. I always change things up. But anyway, I highly recommend using interfacing. I use the heavyweight. You can try using lightweight, but using something as a template when you have your stitched piece on the top, that's going to help you keep it down and in a circle. There's another technique that you could do. Maybe I'll do another top piece and show you how to do it. I just thought of it, just came in my head. That's like windows always open. So you can get a template that's the size you want it to be, and then you can do a basting stitch, 2 basting stitch around it, and you can pull it and pull the seam allowance like you would pull it over this, except for not leaving the template in there. You can remove the template and then tack stitch the seam allowance down, and then you wouldn't have anything underneath your stitching. But I truly do like the interfacing. The 2-ply I will use a lot. 2-ply mat board I use a lot, just like I told you, just because I'm not going to use it as a real drum most of the time, and I needed to keep it shaped to be sent off for trunk shows, which I don't do a whole lot, because these are my babies. Some people have them stitched more than once. They don't stitch with them. I either live with mine, some are living in boxes. I'm trying to figure out what to do with them, but they need to keep their shape because they're moved around a lot more than normal people's stuff. But I also like using interfacing on the back of stitched pieces, because depending on the count of your linen, you're going to be able to see through it. I don't like that. And plus, it helps keep if you use lizard litter or anything like that, it helps keep it in there. I really haven't talked to very many finishers, but some people do use polyester filling or use roving in their drums. Problem is that has no weight in it at all, and it really just takes up space and doesn't allow the lizard litter to filter through like the wood shavings do and help fluff it out. And I know that having wood in there and even having the walnut holes is not the best thing to have inside your piece, but these are pieces you're going to touch and be using. So I'm not as concerned about the archivalness of it as I am some of my other pieces. The other thing you can do, which I have used which I don't know what needle pointers do now, because I haven't talked to many modern needlepoint finishers. A lot of them use glue. We're back to that again. Is you can stuff your stand-ups and other things with the polyester or wool roving. I would probably go with polyester, and then you can get lug nuts. And what I do is put my lug nuts in cling film or in plastic bags, and I seal them up really good and put them on in the base. So if you wanted to do, hi Becky, I hope you enjoyed going up to Not Forgotten Farm. I think that was what you just did. Anyway, you could put lug nuts in cling film and put them across the bottom, and you could stuff the top with a mixture of lizard litter and high pumpkin and do it that way. But again, I just don't think you get the weight, and you don't get the fullness and the heaviness you need for a drum. That works for a stand-up because you just need it to be up and firm, but you need some weight to keep it down. Some people used to like bake beans and rice and then put them in bags, but you're going to get vermin in there. And then living here where the humidity is, it's just not a good combination. I can't tell you how many pieces we would take apart when I worked at the needlepoint shop part-time for Nancy, where bugs had gotten into the stuff or had broken open. That's why even with lug nuts, I wrap them in plastic, because if they get too much moisture, they get this black film on them and it can leach through. But one quick thing, and then I'll let you go. One thing I thought of, when I was thinking I may do cross stitches across the top of, or herringbone across the top edge of this. I've never stitched with anything like this, but I saw this thread and I thought it was really cool, and I thought that I would double it up or do something like that, and that would add a really interesting effect if I did the cross herringbone across the top edge of this once it's finished. And that's another reason, even though the beads are shiny, I got the shiny red, because that's another thing that you could do just to add to it, because you're going to need something to bling it up. But I really do think that this ribbon is going to go around here just to add something to it and make it interesting. So again, thank you guys for watching. I'm going to post this up live. I did do the first part of how to get it all prepped to start working on it, and that's on YouTube. And as I do mine, I don't put the word together, I probably should, but it's floss, then tube, dames, and then the number. And I think that one's like 15 or 16. And then this one, I put a description, the start of the drum. So this one will be floss, tube, dames, and whatever number, and then continuing drum. And then what I'll do is get this all stitched together as much as I can so there's space for the filling. And I'll decide if I may start doing the filling and show you parts of it. And then we will do one on the embellishing. I'll stitch it together. I'll show you how, because it's really precarious. And this is where it starts getting messy. So when you have the filling inside of here and you're stitching the top on, it's wanting to, like, you can't move it too much because it starts going all over the place. So that's why you need plastic down below you or somewhere where you can sweep it up. I mean, when you walk on my floor, because it's concrete in my studio that I've finished the concrete with that acrylic flooring stuff, but it can get on your feet. It's a mess. But as you're going, like with hi Denise, when you're filling it, you're still gonna, it's gonna try to leach out, and you're packing it, you're taking it, you can't see me doing it on the table, but you're shaking it and hitting it on a hard surface, and it makes everything pack down in there. So that's why the little funnel thing I have works really well. Is like I leave openings and I tilt the piece so it's over an area that's stitched, and start pouring the lizard litter in there so it will and shake it, and so it'll start filling out so the whole thing is firm. Because if you don't fill as you're finishing, you can come up with pockets of air and places where it'll dimple in, and you won't have it packed as hard as you want. And another tool I use, you can get wooden turning tools, plastic tools, but I use the wooden chopsticks. That's a great stuffing tool that it's a go-to tool that was taught to me a long time ago. There's a lot of other things you can use. I've seen some people use their scissors, and yes, I have done that. But the bad thing about using scissors, if you're not careful, you can pick your scissors all the way through. Trust me, seen it done. I think I've done it once, but it was fixable. But you definitely want to use something that doesn't have a sharp end, and it's small enough that you can get it in there. But that we'll go over when we're stuffing. So we've put the top on. The side is sewn up. I didn't pull my sewing machine out because I was just not in the mood to go all the way to my studio and do all that. it would have been a little faster and a little more secure. But like I told you, once I start stuffing it, and if I see anything leaching out of the seam allowance, I can, since it's velvet and I got a thread that matches, you can fix it on the outside, and that's where I'm definitely going to work on it being a blind stitch. But depending on how big or where your dimple is or other things on any of your finishing, you can always 99% of the time fix it on the outside and not have to take it all apart and turn it right side out. So that might be like another little thing I can show you on fixing things that you may have missed when you're finishing. So I'm now going to leave you. I've captivated you for a little bit of time. It'll depend on how long it takes me, because today Candace and I have to get a trunk show out, and I cut all the fabric and I have the instructions done and the thread cards are done for the PSS retreat. I just have to make the cover and then get the addresses from Dixie, and I'll be mailing the pre-stitching out for that too. I'll show you guys that one so you can jewel. There'll be some extra kits. I'll be selling them then, and then I'll find out when I can sell them if people want them after that. So, oh, hi, Robin. I'm leaving as you're coming in. Let me wave at you. Thank you. Just watch it live, and hopefully I've answered questions. If I brought any up, always just either PM me or write them on the video. And I am, again, putting this on YouTube, and it's Floss two different words, then dames, and then the number of the video, and then I'm trying to write a description on there. That should be it. I'm not getting all of the messages because I have two business and one personal. It's really stupid. But if you don't hear from me or I don't answer you, PM me or try it again, because the messages aren't coming all the way through. Like I just got one the other day that someone had posted before Christmas. So I'm really not trying to ignore you. It's just all over the place. But you guys have a great day. Get excited. We're getting a new year. I don't do resolutions. I just embrace it as a new start and adjust as I go, and just hope that whatever the weird shit that happened, yes, I say that word in public, doesn't happen again. So I'm hoping my waterworks issues, I have 2 things that need to get fixed, straighten out. I'm not sure if God's telling me that I need to become a rock star and make more money and also move to the ocean, or as I was talking to a very, I want to call her an old friend, but a person I've known for a very long time. We've sort of reconnected just a little bit because we're both busy, but we're supposed to have lunch. But I was telling her my woes, and she was like, maybe you need to move to the top of a mountain so all the water can roll down. Because I'm thinking he's telling me to move to the beach, which I think Nashville's where I want to go, but not the beach, but we'll see. Again, this is like my 15th time of saying bye. Candace should be here soon, and we might do a tasting. I haven't done a live tasting of the almond things that I think I made, but anyway, you might see me again today. Love you guys. Thanks a lot. Bye.